A millionaire visits an orphanage and sees a girl who looks just like his late wife. The rain drummed steadily against the sleek black roof of the Bentley as it wound its way up the narrow road leading to St. Helena's Orphanage. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the trees lining the path swayed gently, whispering secrets of the past. Inside the car, Nicholas Harrington sat in contemplative silence, his piercing blue eyes staring out at the sprawling, weathered building in the distance. St. Helena's was nothing like the grand estates or luxury hotels Nicholas was used to. The orphanage was old, its red brick exterior darkened with years of exposure to wind and rain. The iron gates creaked as the car pulled through, revealing a vast courtyard where children played despite the drizzle. Their laughter, light and unburdened, contrasted with the heavy weight in Nicholas's chest. He had not come here by choice. Weeks ago, his best friend and business partner, Jonathan Carter, had convinced him to consider philanthropy, not the impersonal kind where he simply signed checks, but real, meaningful involvement. Nicholas had resisted at first. His life had been about profits, power, and control. He had built an empire from nothing, clawing his way to the top with ruthless efficiency. But money had never filled the void left by his wife, Eleanor. Eleanor had been the heart in his otherwise cold existence. Her laughter had been the melody to his silence, her warmth a contrast to his relentless ambition. When she died 5 years ago in a tragic accident, something inside him had withered. He buried himself in work, numbing the grief with endless deals and acquisitions. Yet, no matter how much wealth he amassed, it could never bring her back. And now, here he was about to walk into an orphanage, a place filled with lives he had never thought twice about. A place that, he was sure, would make him uncomfortable in ways he didn't want to acknowledge. The car rolled to a stop, and his driver, Samuel, stepped out to open the door. Nicholas adjusted his navy blue coat, smoothed a hand through his dark hair, and stepped onto the wet pavement. The cold was sharp against his skin, but he barely noticed. A woman in her 50s stood at the entrance, waiting for him. Sister Margaret. Jonathan had spoken highly of her, a woman of great patience and kindness, dedicated to the children under her care. As Nicholas approached, she smiled, her weathered face radiating warmth. "Mr. Harrington," she said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." He shook it, her grip surprisingly firm. "Sister Margaret." "It's a pleasure. I imagine this isn't your usual environment," she said, her keen eyes studying him. "But I appreciate you taking the time to visit." "I like to keep an open mind," he replied smoothly, though he wasn't sure if that was true. She chuckled as if she saw right through him. "Come inside. The children would love to meet you." Nicholas followed her into the building, the scent of old wood, warm bread, and something faintly floral wrapping around him. The hallways were simple, lined with photographs of past and present residents. Children peeked curiously from doorways, their eyes filled with both excitement and caution. Sister Margaret led him to a large common room where about a dozen children sat at long wooden tables, some coloring, others playing board games. A few looked up as he entered, whispering to one another. "Everyone," Sister Margaret announced, "this is Mr. Harrington. He's visiting today to learn more about our home." A few children mumbled greetings, while others simply stared. Nicholas had never been particularly good with kids. They were unpredictable, and he disliked unpredictability. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw her. A little girl, no older than 6 or 7, sat apart from the rest, curled up on a window seat. She had chestnut-brown curls that framed a delicate face, and when she lifted her gaze to look at him, Nicholas felt the breath rush from his lungs. For a moment, he thought he was seeing a ghost. Her eyes, golden brown with flecks of amber, were the exact same as Eleanor's. The shape of her lips, the curve of her jaw, even the slight dimple on her left cheek when she frowned, it was all Eleanor. His heart pounded as an impossible thought took root in his mind. Who was this child? And why did she look exactly like the woman he had lost? Sister Margaret, noticing his reaction, followed his gaze. A gentle expression crossed her face. "That's Lily," she said softly. "She's only been here for a few months. A quiet child, but very special. Nicholas barely heard her. He took a step forward, then another. Lily watched him with wide eyes, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Lily," he said, his voice strangely hoarse. "That's your name?" She nodded. He swallowed hard. "How old are you?" "6," she whispered. 6. Eleanor had died 7 years ago. The math didn't make sense, yet something about it gnawed at him. Before he could speak again, Lily suddenly looked down, pulling her knees to her chest. A defensive posture, a sign of wariness. Sister Margaret placed a gentle hand on Nicholas's arm. "She's been through a lot," she murmured. "Trust takes time." Nicholas forced himself to step back, exhaling slowly. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing was clear. He couldn't walk away from this. Not until he had answers. Nicholas Harrington couldn't shake the feeling that the little girl, Lily, was more than just another orphan. As he left the common room, Sister Margaret's words echoed in his head. She's been through a lot. Trust takes time. But what had she been through? And why did she look exactly like Eleanor? Nicholas had never believed in fate. He was a man of logic, of numbers, of cold, calculated decisions. But seeing Lily had upended everything. His grip tightened on the cuff of his sleeve as he followed Sister Margaret down the hallway. He needed answers. Over a modest lunch of soup and bread, Nicholas tried to gather information. Sister Margaret, ever observant, studied him as she sipped her tea. "You seem troubled, Mr. Harrington," she said, placing her cup down. He hesitated. "I'd like to know more about Lily." Her expression softened. "I thought you might." "Where did she come from?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. "Who were her parents?" Sister Margaret sighed, glancing toward the window where rain continued to fall. "She was found abandoned outside a church late one night. No identification, no records. Just a small locket around her neck with the name Lily engraved inside." Nicholas's fingers curled into a fist beneath the table. "A locket?" He swallowed hard. "Do you still have it?" "Yes." "It's in my office." His pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. "And no one ever came looking for her?" "No," Sister Margaret shook her head. "We filed a police report, of course, but no relatives came forward. It was as if she had simply appeared." Nicholas exhaled slowly, his mind racing. Could it be possible? Could Eleanor have had a child he never knew about? No. It was absurd. Eleanor had been faithful, and she would never have hidden something like that from him. Yet the girl was 6 years old. That meant she would have been conceived right before Eleanor's accident. He needed to see that locket. Sister Margaret led him to her office, a small but neatly arranged room filled with books, papers, and an old wooden desk. From one of the drawers, she retrieved a tiny velvet pouch. Handing it to Nicholas, she watched as he carefully opened it. Inside lay a delicate gold locket, slightly tarnished with age. His breath caught as he turned it over in his palm. The engraving was simple but elegant. Lily. With trembling fingers, he popped it open. His heart nearly stopped. Inside was a faded photograph of Eleanor. Nicholas's stomach twisted. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had placed that locket on Lily, wanting to connect her to Eleanor. But who? And why? He looked up sharply. "You said she was found at a church. Which one?" "St. Mark's, about 20 miles from here." Nicholas knew that church. Eleanor used to go there occasionally for charity work. He clenched his jaw. If there were answers, they were at St. Mark's. That evening, Nicholas instructed his driver, Samuel, to take him to the church. The rain had let up, but the sky remained overcast, casting the city in a dull gray light. St. Mark's was an old stone structure with towering stained-glass windows. Inside, the scent of wax and aged wood filled the air. Candles flickered near the altar, and a lone priest stood arranging hymn books. Nicholas approached cautiously. "Father James." The elderly priest turned, his lined face breaking into a warm, though surprised, smile. "Mr. Harrington." "It's been years." Nicholas nodded. "I need your help." Father James studied him carefully. "Come. Let's talk." As they sat in a quiet pew, Nicholas explained everything. Lily, the locket, the eerie resemblance to Eleanor. The priest listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Nicholas finished, Father James sighed. There was a woman who came to me 6 years ago, desperate and afraid. She was pregnant, but she wouldn't tell me much, only that she needed to keep her child safe. Nicholas's heartbeat thundered in his ears. What did she look like? Father James hesitated, then spoke softly. She looked very much like your Eleanor. Nicholas's breath hitched. But, the priest added carefully, she wasn't Eleanor. Shock coursed through him. Then who is she? I don't know. She never told me her name. She only stayed a few nights, then vanished, leaving the baby at the church steps months later. Nicholas gritted his teeth. A woman who looked like Eleanor? Pregnant with a child that would grow up to resemble her perfectly? The mystery deepened. Do you remember anything else? He asked. Father James nodded. She had an unusual scar, just below her jawline. Nicholas stiffened. He had seen that same scar before, on Eleanor's younger sister, Isabel. Isabel. The realization hit him like a train. She and Eleanor had been close once, but a bitter fight had driven them apart years before Eleanor's death. Isabel had vanished after that, refusing contact with the family. Could Isabel have been the woman at St. Mark's? And if she was, did that mean Lily was her daughter? Nicholas had to find her. But Isabel had disappeared without a trace. Finding her wouldn't be easy. Nicholas hired a private investigator, James Calloway, to track down Isabel. Days passed, filled with restless nights and endless waiting. Meanwhile, Nicholas visited the orphanage frequently, spending time with Lily. At first, she was distant, wary of his presence. But slowly, she began to trust him, allowing him to read to her, sitting beside him during meals. One evening, as he tucked her into bed, she looked up at him and whispered, "Do you know my mommy?" Nicholas's chest tightened. "I think I might." Lily's small fingers brushed the locket she always wore. "I miss her." A lump formed in his throat. "I know." Just then his phone buzzed. It was Calloway. "I found Isabel." Nicholas stood abruptly, his heart hammering. "Where is she?" There was a pause before Calloway said, "She's in a hospital, Mr. Harrington. She's dying." 6. Nicholas wasted no time. The next morning, he arrived at a hospice facility on the outskirts of the city. Isabel lay in a bed, frail and weak, her once vibrant auburn hair now streaked with gray. Her tired eyes met his, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then, she let out a weak chuckle. "You found me." Nicholas swallowed hard. "Why, Isabel? Why did you leave her?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't have a choice. I was sick. I knew I wouldn't live long enough to raise her. And I thought if I left her at that church, someone would take her in. Someone better than me." Nicholas clenched his jaw. "She deserved to know you." Isabel's voice broke. "Does she remember me?" Nicholas hesitated, then shook his head. "Not really." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I wish I had more time." Nicholas's heart ached. He had hated Isabel once, but now, seeing her like this, all he felt was sorrow. "She still has you," she whispered. "Don't let her grow up alone." His throat tightened. "I won't." Isabel exhaled a shaky breath, her body going limp. The monitors beeped steadily. Her time was running out. With a trembling hand, Nicholas reached for hers. "I'll take care of her. I promise." A small, grateful smile touched Isabel's lips. And then, as peacefully as a candle flickering out, she was gone. Nicholas sat there for a long time, grief washing over him. But through the sorrow, one thing became clear. Lily was family, and he would do whatever it took to protect her. Nicholas Harrington had never felt pressure like this before. He had built an empire from the ground up, survived hostile takeovers, and fought through market crashes. But none of it compared to what he was facing now. Lily wasn't just another orphan. She was family, his late wife's niece, the last connection to Eleanor. And now, he was in danger of losing her. The orphanage's board had been reluctant about his sudden interest in adopting Lily. Despite his wealth and influence, they were concerned about his lifestyle. A man who had never raised a child, who spent his life between boardrooms and first-class flights. Even Sister Margaret, who had seen his growing bond with Lily, had her doubts. And then, just as Nicholas had started to convince them that he was the right person to raise Lily, the worst possible thing happened. Nicholas was in his study late one evening when his phone rang. He answered without looking at the caller ID, assuming it was his lawyer with an update. But the voice on the other end made his blood run cold. "Mr. Harrington," the woman said smoothly. "My name is Victoria Langley. I represent the Kensington Adoption Agency." Nicholas sat up straighter. "What can I do for you, Ms. Langley?" There was a pause before she said, "I'm calling to inform you that another party has come forward with a legal claim to adopt Lily." His heart pounded.
"What?"
A couple has stepped forward, claiming familial ties to Lily's late mother. They're filing for immediate custody. Nicholas gritted his teeth. "Who are they?" "I can't disclose their names at this time," Langley said, her tone clipped. "But given that they are direct blood relatives and have an established home, the agency is considering their petition." Nicholas slammed his fist on the desk. "Lily doesn't even know them. I've been building trust with her for weeks." Be that as it may, the law prioritizes biological family over non-relatives in adoption cases, she said. "You'll need to provide compelling evidence that living with you is in her best interest. Otherwise," she didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. Nicholas understood the message loud and clear. If he didn't act fast, he would lose Lily. Nicholas spent the next 24 hours making calls, trying to find out who was trying to take Lily away. When his investigator, James Calloway, finally called back, his news made Nicholas's stomach twist. "It's Eleanor's distant cousins, the Whitmans," Calloway said. Nicholas's jaw tightened. He barely remembered the Whitmans, but what he did recall wasn't good. They had been estranged from Eleanor's side of the family for years, only appearing after her death to inquire about her estate. Now they wanted Lily? Why would they even care? Nicholas asked, gripping the phone. "They recently fell into financial trouble. From what I can tell, they see Lily as an opportunity, a way to gain access to inheritance money tied to her mother's name." Nicholas cursed under his breath. It wasn't about family. It was about greed. And there was no way he was going to let them win. The courtroom was colder than Nicholas expected. He sat stiffly in his seat, his lawyer beside him, as the judge prepared to hear both sides. On the opposite side of the room sat the Whitmans, a middle-aged couple with fake smiles and even faker sympathy. They had never once visited Lily, never asked about her well-being. And yet here they were, claiming they were the best choice for her future. The judge looked between them. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitman, you claim to be the closest biological relatives to the child. Why do you believe she should be placed in your care?" Mrs. Whitman put on a sorrowful expression. "We just want to give her a loving home, Your Honor. She belongs with family." Nicholas clenched his fists. His lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Harrington has been actively involved in Lily's life for weeks. He has built trust with her, provided emotional stability, and is financially capable of giving her the best possible future." The judge nodded. "Mr. Harrington, why do you wish to adopt Lily?" Nicholas took a steady breath and rose. "Because she's not just some distant relative to me," he said, his voice firm. "She's my late wife's niece. I see my wife in her every day, in the way she smiles, in the way she carries herself. I don't want to take care of her out of obligation. I want to do it because I love her, because I know what my wife would have wanted for her." The room was silent. Even the Whitmans shifted uncomfortably. The judge looked at Lily, who was sitting with Sister Margaret. "Lily, do you have anything you'd like to say?" The little girl hesitated. Then, in a small voice, she said, "I want to stay with Nicholas." Nicholas's heart nearly broke. The judge studied the Whitmans for a long moment before speaking. "I've reviewed both parties' claims, and after careful consideration, I'm granting full custody of Lily to Nicholas Harrington." Nicholas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It was over. Lily was his. But as Nicholas and Lily left the courthouse, the Whitmans weren't finished. Mrs. Whitman stormed up to them, her face red with anger. "You think this is over?" We're appealing the decision. Nicholas stood his ground. You lost. Walk away. But Mr. Whitman smirked. You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about custody. It's about money.
And we
We'll find a way to get what's ours. Nicholas felt Lily's small hand tighten around his. He looked down at her, scared, confused. He had spent his life negotiating deals worth billions, facing ruthless businessmen who would stop at nothing. Now, he had only one job: protect Lily no matter what. You come near her again, he said coldly, and I will personally make sure you regret it. For a moment, the Whitmans seemed to waver. Then, with a final glare, they turned and disappeared into the crowd. Nicholas exhaled, kneeling down to face Lily. It's over, he whispered. No one's going to take you away. She looked at him, her big eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before: relief. You promise? Nicholas swallowed hard, then nodded. I promise. And for the first time in years, he knew that he had finally found something more important than money. He had found family. The morning sun spilled through the grand windows of Nicholas Harrington's estate, casting golden light over the polished floors. The house, once quiet and devoid of warmth, now echoed with the sounds of soft laughter and the occasional pattering of small feet. Lily was home. It had been weeks since the court granted Nicholas full custody, and in that time, his world had changed in ways he never thought possible. His once rigid schedule, structured around business meetings, stock market updates, and luxury travel, was now dictated by school drop-offs, bedtime stories, and Saturday morning pancake disasters in the kitchen. And he wouldn't have had it any other way. Nicholas walked into the dining room to find Lily sitting at the long oak table, her small hands wrapped around a glass of orange juice. She was still in her pajamas, her dark curls a tangled mess from sleep. Good morning, kiddo, he greeted, ruffling her hair as he sat down. Morning, she mumbled sleepily before taking a bite of her toast. Sister Margaret, who had temporarily moved in to help with the transition, smiled warmly from across the table. She's settling in well, she observed. Much better than I expected. Nicholas nodded. It hadn't been easy, adjusting to life as a father figure after years of solitude. The first few nights, Lily had trouble sleeping, waking up crying for her mother. Nicholas had stayed up with her, comforting her the best he could. Over time, the nightmares had become less frequent, and she had started to trust that he wasn't going anywhere. But the biggest hurdle wasn't just helping Lily adjust to her new life. It was proving to her that she was truly loved. Can we go to the park today? Lily asked suddenly, looking up at him with hopeful eyes. Nicholas glanced at his phone. He had a morning meeting scheduled with the board of Harrington Enterprises, an important one at that. But as he looked at Lily's expectant face, he made a decision. Yeah, he said, setting his phone aside. Let's go to the park. Lily's whole face lit up. Really?
really
Sister Margaret chuckled. You're going soft, Mr. Harrington. Nicholas only smiled. Maybe he was. And for the first time, he didn't mind point two. Nicholas had hoped that the Whitmans would disappear after losing the custody battle, but he wasn't naive. He knew people like them, greedy, relentless, and willing to do whatever it took to get what they wanted. So when his lawyer, David Calloway, called that afternoon, Nicholas wasn't surprised. They filed an appeal, Calloway said. Nicholas exhaled sharply. Of course they did. They're arguing that you're unfit to be a guardian because of your demanding career, Calloway continued. They're claiming that Lily would be better off with a traditional family rather than a single businessman. Nicholas felt anger bubble in his chest. And what's the likelihood of this actually working? Low, Calloway assured him. The judge already ruled in your favor based on Lily's best interest. Courts rarely overturn decisions like this unless there's new, compelling evidence, which they don't have. They're grasping at straws. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. So, what's our next move? Nothing, Calloway said. For now, we wait. And, in the meantime, just keep being a great father to Lily. That's the best thing you can do. Nicholas glanced across the room, where Lily was playing with a set of dolls on the rug. He made a silent vow. No matter what happened, he wouldn't let them take her away. A week later, A letter arrived. Nicholas almost threw it away, assuming it was another legal document, but something about the handwriting on the envelope caught his attention. It wasn't typed. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was from Eleanor's mother. He hadn't spoken to Eleanor's parents in years, not since her passing. They had been devastated by her death and chose to grieve privately, distancing themselves from everything that reminded them of their daughter, including him. Hands slightly trembling, he unfolded the letter and began to read. Dear Nicholas, I know it has been years since we last spoke, and for that, I am sorry. Losing Eleanor broke me in ways I never expected, and in my grief, I made the mistake of shutting you out. But recently, I learned about Lily. I heard about what you've done for her, how you fought for her, how you've given her a home. Thank you, Nicholas, for everything. We would like to see her. If she's ready, if you're willing. We don't want to interfere. We only want to know our granddaughter. With deepest gratitude, Margaret and William Dawson. Nicholas stared at the letter, emotions swirling in his chest. He had always assumed the Dawsons wanted nothing to do with him after Eleanor's death. But now, after all these years, they wanted to be a part of Lily's life. He folded the letter carefully, knowing that this wasn't his decision to make. It was Lily's that weekend. Nicholas and Lily stood outside a quiet countryside home. The air was thick with anticipation. Are you sure about this? Nicholas asked gently, kneeling beside her. Lily clutched his hand. I think so. He squeezed her fingers reassuringly. If at any point you want to leave, we'll go. No questions asked. She nodded. Nicholas knocked on the door. Moments later, an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair opened it. Lily, she breathed, tears already streaming down her face. The little girl hesitated, studying the woman. And then, to Nicholas's surprise, she whispered, Grandma? Margaret Dawson let out a soft sob and pulled her into a gentle hug. Watching them, Nicholas felt something settle in his chest. This was right. After a few moments, William Dawson stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. Nicholas, thank you. Nicholas shook his hand. She deserves a family, he said simply. The afternoon passed with laughter, stories, and bittersweet memories of Eleanor. By the time the sun began to set, Lily was curled up in Margaret's lap, listening to a story about her mother as a little girl. Nicholas had never seen her look so at peace. Home. That night, as they drove back home, Lily was quiet. You okay? Nicholas asked. She looked up at him, her brown eyes shining.
Yeah, she said.
I'm happy. Nicholas smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. For the first time in years, his house wasn't just a house. It was a home. And he wasn't just Nicholas Harrington, billionaire businessman. He was a father. And he knew, without a doubt, that Eleanor would have been proud.